Hello everyone, it's Danny Wilson, strength and conditioning coach from Boxing Science, and in this special workshop you're going to learn how to train like the machine, as I'm going to be providing commentary, taking you through the strength and conditioning and sports science practices that we've been putting Anthony Fowler through for the last 6 months. The 2014 Commonwealth gold medalist turned to the professional ranks in May 2017. Great foundations and a great athlete built from the world-class sports science program down at GB Boxing, and we had to be creative in ways how we can make the machine even fitter, faster and stronger. We will show you the sports science testing that we put Anthony through, the grueling conditioning drills on the curve, strength conditioning to get him faster and stronger, and the mobility drills to fine-tune his body. Pick up a pen and paper and take some notes, as you're going to learn how to train like the machine. So the first section covers the first steps. So I'll be explaining the testing protocols I'll put Anthony through, the alternative conditioning methods that we have to do, and how we started building the foundations of movement and strength.
Yeah. Have you used one of these before?
So we put Anthony through our boxing science testing battery. This includes jumps, punches, a lactate profile, and some mobility assessments too. First test that we do is a counter movement jump and a squat jump. Now the counter movement jump is what Anthony's doing now, where he's flexing at the hips and knees rapidly and then jumping as high as he can. So Anthony showed some great explosiveness, scoring 45 centimetres, which works around about 16% higher than the average boxer. Now we do two different kinds of jumps. We do the squat jump and counter movement jump, and what I'm demonstrating now is a squat jump.
Move your knees, swing your arms back, arms forward, and you can try for it.
And basically the squat jump doesn't have that counter movement, so it doesn't rely on the stretch shortening cycle and the hamstrings, quads and glutes. So what we found with a lot of boxers, including Anthony, is that the difference between the squat jump and the counter movement jump is quite low. And actually what we found with Anthony is that the squat jump is actually higher than his counter movement jump. Now the counter movement jump should be much higher than the squat jump because of the stretch shortening and the hamstrings and the glutes and the quads are helping produce that force instead of just that rapid explosiveness that Anthony's showing there. So with that, when somebody comes in and they have a low score, or even like what Anthony has shown as a higher squat jump than counter movement jump, that shows that he's not being able to utilise the eccentric properties of their muscles. So, you know, we're needing him to control that force to be able to produce fast and explosive movements using his stretch shortening cycle. And I'll be explaining how we combated that and tried to increase and improve Anthony's eccentric utilisation through the program. Okay, so the next test that we use is the landmine punch throw, and we assess the velocity of the bar as the boxers throw a 20 kilo Olympic bar as fast as they can at me. So I'm putting my life on the line for science right here. We start on 20 kilos, we perform 5 reps on each side, and the load on the bar goes up 5 kilos every time. Now the velocities of the bar obviously go lower as the weight goes up, but this can tell us what kind of athlete that we've got. If they are really fast at 20 kilos but go down quite fast, we've got an explosive fast puncher that maybe can add a little bit more strength. Also, if we've got somebody that's quite slow at the start but maintains their speed all the way through, they're a strong puncher and can benefit from some more explosive and some speed training. Now what Anthony Fowler showed was great explosiveness compared to our boxers on the program, 5 or 10% higher velocities on lighter loads. However, at heavier loads that he's just throwing now, it's a little bit behind So that's showing the need for that maximal strength training. This testing was inspired by a more traditional testing method, which is creating a load velocity profile. So testing your different velocities, different loads on your key exercises. So we did the squat, the deadlift, and the bench. And this basically tells us a lot more about the boxer and how they respond to different loads and whether they're a strong athlete or an explosive one. What it's really good for, especially on our key lifts, it's able to tell us what velocities that Anthony should be hitting at different times. So we can target strength, speed, strength, and target maximal strength, but kind of elicit that maximal effort, give them a target to make sure that they're lifting at speed. Now, due to technique issues and risk of injury, I don't put 1 rep max testing into my program. So doing a load velocity profile is a great substitute, as we can actually predict 1 rep max using different calculations. This is a much safer and effective way for analysing data, but also shows us how they're lifting at lighter loads. So for example, if he's lifting faster at 80% 1RM than he was 5 weeks previous, that means that it's improved his strength speed, and this is often a target for our boxers. The velocities are recorded using a nice piece of equipment that you're seeing on the screen here. This is called the GymAware. A little black box with a tether attached to the bar, and it gives us feedback on a load of different parameters, including velocity, peak wattage. What we want to record mainly is mean velocity and peak velocity. Mean velocity on our key lifts and peak velocity through our landmine punch test. It's a decent piece of kit, it's quite expensive, and we're fortunate to have access to this at Sheffield Hallam University.
Good, well done.
Fitness test that we use in our labs is the lactate profile. It's a great way to determine specific physiological responses to high intensity exercise. Rather than myself explain this, I'll let Dr. Alan Ruddock provide a very quick and concise explanation.
So a lactate profile is a little bit like boxing. There's 3 minutes of running and 1 minute of recovery. In that 1 minute recovery period, we take a small blood sample from his fingertip. And now, when we take that sample, we can then pop it into a machine and look at his blood lactate. Lactate starts to appear in the blood when athletes get a little bit tired. So the more tired they get, the more lactate appears in their blood. And we can use this information to try and figure out what type of athlete we're working with. Are we working with more of an endurance type athlete, or are we working with more of a high intensity type athlete? And we use this as part of our training prescription.
So we're just going to go through a little review of Anthony's results here. What you can see on screen now is a graph, a figure, and it's plotting blood lactate and heart rate against running speed. Now, lactate occurs in the blood when we start to get a little bit tired, and sports scientists like us, we can use it in various different ways to create training zones, to look at the type of athlete we are working with, whether they're endurance-based athletes, whether they're high-intensity-based athletes. Kind of gives us a good picture to understand how our athletes derive energy and use energy. Now, Anthony has the moniker The Machine, and for good reason. When he first came to us, he definitely was a machine, but he looked more like an endurance machine rather than a high-intensity athlete, which is what we're looking to try and develop with on our program. So what we found is that Anthony had quite a curve that looked quite typical of an endurance athlete. So his blood lactate concentration was really quite low to start with, then all of a sudden it kicked up, and you can see that in the black curve at the bottom of the screen there. So nice and low to start with, and then a big kick up at the end. And so from that we thought, Anthony's a machine, but he's more of an endurance type athlete rather than a high intensity athlete, which is what we were trying to develop. So over the period of 12 to 15 weeks, which was the time frame between the two tests, as you know, and Dan will come on to it, we did quite a lot of high intensity interval training with him to try and change him from this endurance type athlete into a more high intensity type athlete.
Now onto our 2 mobility assessments. We choose the overhead squat and the single leg squat to stand. Now I'm going to talk you through Anthony's pictures. So on the overhead squat, it shows good depth but quite tight shoulders, excessive forward lean. It's quite mobile lower body. Upper body, he needs to kind of work on them shoulders, especially like his left side. As you can see, his left is going slightly further forward than his right. Not too much of a cause for concern because a lot of boxers have these issues. Now, single leg squat to stand test shows us specific imbalances in the legs and trunk. So basically, you want him to sit on one leg onto a bench or a box, just over parallel, and you want to be controlling it as slow as you can down, making sure you're not sticking side to side. Looks like I'm doing a funny dance here rather than demonstrating. So you can see that Fowler starts rounding of the lower back when he's coming down. This can be like kind of like tightness in his hamstrings and maybe a little bit of weakness in his core stabilizers. So he has got a strong core, but maybe it needs challenging in different ways to improve it. So the view from the front tells us a lot more about what's happening. Now there's a slight shift to the right, which shows to me like a little bit of weakness in the right glute when he's on his right hand side, but also on the left hand side, his left knee is caving in, showing quite a lot of tightness in his adductors as well. And if he's doing a lot of running on this, this can cause like Achilles injuries, knee injuries, everything like that. So it's nothing too abnormal for boxers. A lot of boxers look like this when they first come into the program. It just needs a lot of work on like kind of adductor flexibility, core stability, and hip flexibility, and most importantly, improving strength in the glutes. All this information is fed back to Anthony in a structured format and explained in person. Me and Alan work hard as a team to analyse performance, to analyse strengths and areas for improvement, and to develop a programme to make them even fitter, faster and stronger athletes. So prior to his pro debut, we only had 3 or 4 weeks to work with Anthony. So it was important to work on things without fatiguing him too much. So we just basically introduced him to the boxing science training methods and focus on mobility and improving his movement, his core stability as well. This mobility warm-up that you're watching now is what we do for all our boxers. We want to basically ingrain these training methods into them so they can do them at home, at the gym, at the boxing gym as well, and start integrating into the warm-up, because you can get a lot of quick wins just through moving better and being more stable. So this is one of my favourite warm-up drills with leg lowers, just working the core and increasing the intensity of the core by moving the arms in different positions. So glute stretch, it's really good at this. Stretching TFL, glute piriformis as well. A lot of boxers struggle to get it at a right angle, but Fowler looks like he's a pro at this. And this, the little kind of hip hike and stretching of the hamstrings and the calves, something that Anthony actually does himself, and something that I've picked up on as well. We must have got that from the great team down at GB Boxing. We then transition this into yoga press up. Now this is great exercise to loosen off the hamstrings, the calves, good for shoulder mobility as well, warming up all the upper body and the core. The challenge is when he comes back down into position is to keep them, when them hips are coming down, to stop them coming past the shoulders. So that's why I'm just realigning his shoulders there, and that's really activating the core. A lot of people can end up letting the hips drop all the way down, and then that's just kind of activating the lower back and not letting the core activate and warm up. Transition this into Spider-Man and twists. It's not a strength conditioning program if this stretch is in there. A great stretch for your hips. I'm just telling Anthony to just drop his back knee in there. The boxers have tight hips, they won't drop the knee in. And also when they rotate, the important thing is to rotate on the inside instead of just flinging their arms back. Really focus on that upper body rotation, and as well to keep their lower body stable. So rotating the upper body as much as you can, but keeping the lower body stable. Yeah, and then we go into a Spider-Man to squat and hold it there, pushing out the knees. And this is really good to kind of loosen off the hips, the adductors. We also use a squat to overhead reach. It's good for shoulder mobility, core stability. And the aim is to get into a nice deep squat. Try and just open up them shoulders, open up your chest, not just fling your arms back. But this is my favourite exercise to develop a strong squat movement pattern. A squat with a plate press. You're pressing as the weight goes down, acting as a counterbalance. It's getting you into a great position. As you can see, Anthony's getting much deeper than the overhead squat that we showed you just a few minutes ago. So pushing out, making sure you're sticking your knees out and getting nice and deep. And you won't see it from this angle, but you've got a nice straight back, not leaning forward that much either. So it's a great exercise to develop your squat patterns here. Always handy with the stick, making sure the program runs smoothly. We go into lunge and twist. Lower body strength, lower body mobility, but also separating that upper body rotation with lower body stability as well. It's important as we want to be able to transfer force through the lower body, through rotation, through core rotation as well. And if we aren't able to separate upper body rotation with lower body stability, we can end up losing the transfer of force. Should feel nice stretch of the hips. And also not flinging your arms back again. As you can see, Anthony's chest is just rotating. Rotating with the stick. This transitions into a lateral lunge. Now I can see he's struggling with his depth here, so I use a stick as a cue to push out his arms. Similar to the squat to press, it's acting as a little bit of a counterbalance. It's able to push his hips back more and get a little bit deeper. The challenge for him is to keep his hips, knees and feet facing in all one direction, especially onto his right side. You can see that his right foot's just wanting to turn out a little bit. And because I noticed obviously an obvious movement restriction in his overhead squat, we can challenge it in a few different ways. You know, doing overhead box squats and the squat with overhead reach that I've just shown. But a good way in improving hip mobility and overhead mobility is this little exercise here, where you basically pushing the stick above your head whilst doing a lunge. It's really activating all the posterior shoulders, opening up the chest and hip mobility as well. Due to the boxer being quite tight in his hips and his shoulders, what can happen? A hyperextension of the spine, elevation of the rib cage, and this is just activating lower back a bit. So as you can see, I'm just realigned Anthony's back by trying to keep his rib cage down, his head forward, and this should intensify the stretch. Now up comes my favourite kind of plyometric or hopping drill, is the ice skaters. Ice skaters are really good because lateral movement is important in boxing. Also it challenges like kind of the hip stability in lateral movement. You see, like what we're saying about the single leg squat, Anthony struggles with kind of his glute strength and his glute med strength. This is important to be dealing with lateral movement. So you can see he's struggling to bend at the knees, flex at the hips as he's going across. So this needs a lot of coaching if you're putting it into your athletes. So I'll always say, imagine yourself at the Winter Olympics, your inline skater, and look what they look like when they're racing around the ice rink. They're nice and low. This is why we call them ice skaters. Nice and low. They've got the opposite arm, opposite leg. You can see it's getting lower now. It's utilising all his glutes, his quads, his hamstrings as well to just stabilise his hip. It's much better. So I explained in the testing with Anthony that he struggled with the counter movement jump compared to his squat jump, but he also showed quite explosiveness anyway. So I wanted to try and improve his eccentric utilisation, and to do this, just concentrating on his landing mechanics. So you can see he's already struggling to get into that squat position straight away, so I'm just going to demonstrate now. You want to stick it, hamstrings and glutes, they control the forces going down, get in a strong position, and then explode. Now, later on in the program, this kind of transitions to loaded counter movement jumps and a depth jump without the actual pause. From a strength perspective, we worked on loads of around 6 to 8 reps. You know, Fowler was quite strong. Just working on various push and pulls. Lower body worked on goblet squat and kettlebell swings. And this was just basically me trying to gauge where he was at. So in 3 weeks, not fatiguing him too much, but just having to see how he responded to different strength exercises, seeing what we can and can't do to make sure that we're going to optimise his training plan over the foreseeable future. It's a good move for somebody that struggles with overhead mobility to target the shoulders, in particular the anterior and posterior shoulder. The long line press, taking the strains and the rigours of overhead pressing and still targeting the same muscle group and adaptation. Also getting him working on punch specific stuff as well. It's important to learn how to transfer the force of new strength exercises as well. And we did this through a med ball drill as well, where we did rotational throws. We paired that up with heavy medicine ball punch throws, getting that core rotation into his punches. With just 3 weeks before the fight, I didn't want to put him on the curve because I thought that this would be a bit of shock to the system. So I wanted to give him some conditioning drills that he's used to. So I knew that he liked being beasted on some circuits. Fortunately, it was good weather when he started, so we managed to go outside. And we share the gym with a strongman training group as well, so we've got some great strongman equipment, so we can be quite imaginative with our circuit drills. So yeah, so we put in some circuits. We did some red zone runs as well, some Tabatas and some 30-15s. Just get him conditioned and get him ready for the fight in 3 weeks. But you know, he came in great shape anyway. So this little circuit was time trial, 10 goblet squat to press, 20 meters farmer walks there and back, so that's 40 meters overall, 10 press ups, 10 kettlebell swings. And this took him around about a minute and 20. And he'd always have a minute and 30 off and repeat about 3 or 4 times. So Anthony went out and he absolutely blasted through his opponent in 1 round on his debut. So he literally had a 5-minute break, and I want you to do exactly the same. So refuel, re-energize yourself, and get ready as we introduce the main training block that we've done with Anthony. Okay, so the next section is our training over the summer, leading to his fight in September. So I'm going to be explaining the key exercises and the different variations that we had, and one of the variations that we did do is velocity-based training. Also, he started his curve journey, so I'm going to be explaining the different programs that we put in place and the improvements that were made. The key exercise that we use for a squat pattern was the safety squat bar. Before I start explaining more about this, I'd like to apologise because as I was going through my videos for this, I could only find one video, I could only find one 7-second video of Anthony doing the safety squats, so I do apologise. But yeah, so we did the safety squats, and the reason why, due to Anthony's core stability issues, he wasn't able to perform the right techniques on the straight bar to overload his legs. So we wanted to take that away, so we actually overloaded the legs, and the safety squat bar does that for you. It reduces the limitations that a straight bar can create. However, the loading of the legs became a little bit too much and started affecting him in his boxing training, and that's not what we're here to do. We're here to make him feel faster and stronger in his training, and we want to reduce that soreness. So we need to find a way to keep improving the squat pattern without causing too much eccentric load and to try and reduce that muscle soreness. So we used Anderson squats. Anderson squats take away the eccentric portion of a squat, so it reduces muscle damage. But at the same time, it kind of overloads the core.
Yeah, good.
Now, the reason why we want to overload the core is to try and improve trunk mass, and this is the most important contributor to a hard punch. So Anthony was able to develop a strong squatting pattern without causing too much eccentric damage. However, we still needed to improve eccentric utilisation, and to take a full squat away is going to affect our ability to do so. So we had to find different ways and creative methods that we can improve eccentric utilisation without a full range squat and without creating any sort of muscle soreness or fatigue. To do this, we integrated a range of explosive, plyometric and ballistic exercises into his warm-up to make sure that we keep developing the stretch shortening cycle. So here we have a box drop jump and the altitude landings. Got kettlebell swing. There's a little bit of slower stretch shortening cycle than the drop jump, but still, you know, a fast eccentric control of the hamstrings and the glutes. We paired this up with a box jump, focusing on that small dip before instead of just like bouncing off the toes. We also included a accentuated counter movement jump. This is like a preload using dumbbells as you descend on a jump. Sorry for the shaky camera work. As you preload, going to the eccentric portion of the jump, you go down with 10 kilos, 7.5 kilo dumbbells, and drop the dumbbells at the bottom and then jump as high as you can. So that's basically creating a great eccentric demand for your muscles to cope with. And you can do exactly the same using a drop jump, so just using a low box, stepping off and getting into that counter movement jump position, but having a great eccentric. Again, not great filming skills on this one. The key lift that we use for the lower body is the trap bar deadlift. Now, the trap bar deadlift is a preferred exercise variation for boxers due to basically the shoulder mobility issues that they have. The straight bar deadlift can be quite difficult to load up without like compromise of form or like tension through the spine and the lower back. So we're wanting to get our athletes as strong as possible in a short amount of time. We need them to get stronger and more explosive by the time that they are stepping through the ropes. So the trap bar deadlift gives us more bang for your buck. Anthony ended up lifting around 150 kilos, so this is above twice his body weight. If he was on a straight bar, we'd still be like kind of learning the techniques and being really cautious about the amount of load that he was lifting. The trap bars allowed us to lift more load, therefore get greater strength and speed gains. The main thing for Anthony whilst doing this lift was making sure that he was tensing through his shoulders before he goes. You can see he's keeping nice straight back throughout, making sure that his hips and his torso are moving up simultaneously. As the bar gets heavier, you can tell that Anthony wants to yank it a little bit more, like in this clip. But it's still sound technique, really. It's being really picky, but we just say take the slack out of the bar, pull your shoulders back, lock it down, and making sure that you're driving through your heels and pushing through the floor.
Nice. Speed, man.
So you can hear me queuing for Anthony to lift the bar at speed, and this was a big factor when working in towards here 5-6 weeks out from his fight in September. We wanted to be working on strength speed rather than maximal strength, and this is where we introduced the gym aware as part of his training. So we basically set him different loads, so we wanted him to work at 110 kilos, which is around 75% of his 1RM, and gave him specific velocity targets. So he was supposed to be hitting anywhere between 0.65 to 0.7. You can tell he's blasted through these numbers in a relatively short by the end of this training block. Anthony was hitting 0.83 meters per second, so that's an improvement around about 20%. So it's improved his strength, speed, and his explosiveness by 20%. So really happy with these results. And you know, having the Gym Aware is a great feedback tool to make sure that is lifting explosively, rather than me saying, yeah, that looked faster, or you can be a little bit faster than that. Having them numbers there and giving Anthony the feedback elicited a better response. Again, apologies for the repeated clips, but you can't film everything in 6 months. So moving on to horizontal pressing, we use dumbbells in opposed to working on the bench because of different niggles that boxers can have with using a barbell. Shoulder issues and wrist issues as well. So dumbbells are quite a friendly piece of kit for boxers to use. Anthony started around 30 kilos, and we steadily progressed him to be lifting 37.5 and 40 kilos as well. I think this is his first attempt at 40 kilos. So you can tell on our technique that we use at Boxing Science, it's very much like a punch where your hands are turned in. He's very happy with that. Where your hands are turned in at the start, and your hand rotates as you get further up the movement, as you extend your arm. And this method's used to basically be a little bit more friendly on the shoulders. So if your hands are turned out at the start, you can create a lot of load going through that anterior shoulder that gets a lot of load through your boxing activity as well. As well, it encourages more tricep recruitment that can help through the sticking point. And a lot of boxers struggle with activating the triceps as well, so do little techniques to help them out. If you had your hands facing in all the way through, that'll require a little bit too much work for your triceps, so you'll end up sacrificing load. So we find this a good way, and as well, having kind of transferring towards a punch is helpful for the boxers. Here's a little variation that we use between 4 and 8 weeks out from the fight. We're working through a strength speed phase. The Gym Aware doesn't really link to the dumbbells. We can use push band for this, but to just make sure that we're keeping the speed, having bands around the back basically makes it a little bit harder going through the sticking point. So if Anthony hasn't got speed on that lift there, he's going to be struggling to be able to extend his arms. So the band encourages that maximal effort, that maximal speed on lighter loads. As we transitioned around about 4 weeks out from the fight, we put in bench press throw. This is to improve upper body explosiveness. Now we can use the landmine punch throw, it's variation, but you can get more load through this. So we're getting 50 kilos worth of load to overload the upper body to improve strength speed. So working on pulling exercises. Now I've already explained about Anthony having quite a strong back, and this was actually pointed out by his previous S&C coach down at GB Boxing. I needed to try and overload the back. Now you can either do that through speed, volume, or through weight load. No, we've got increased weight load when doing pulling exercises. Because of the tightness around the shoulders, this can be kind of risk of injury, and as well it requires a lot of forearm and wrist strength and grip strength as well. So I opted to do more volume work. So we've got Anthony doing some inverted rows here. He'll do 8 weighted, and then basically he'll take off the sandbag and then do 8 more. So targeting it through volume will be much better and kind of work the lats a bit harder. Another way to overload the back for Anthony was through speed. We use a similar protocol with the accommodating resistance, putting the band across the chest and doing TRX rows like that. So Anthony had to attack each rep by speed. If not, he'd find it hard to complete the rep. There's nothing too inspiring about his vertical pull, but we do pull-ups. but we do neutral grip pull-ups. So we're lucky enough to have a set of parallel bars in the gym. It's perfect because, a little bit like I was saying about the chest press, having the hands turn inwards creates less load through the shoulders, whereas on a wide grip pull-up, where we're targeting the lats, sometimes boxers can find it difficult to pull without internally rotating the humeral head, so hunching round with the shoulders. So having that neutral grip allows us to target the lats more, get the core more involved in the movement, and the lads find it so much harder than normal pull-ups. As we go through the program, the reps get less and the weight goes up. So we've got Anthony lifting around about 20-25 kilos in between his legs and lifting for anywhere between 3 and 5 reps. As we move closer to the fight, we're wanting to decrease the load and increase the speed, and it's quite hard to do this doing pulling. So we use cable rotations to be a little bit more dynamic, reduce the load and encourage a fast pulling action. On vertical pressing, moving on from the landmine press, we work to a single arm dumbbell press. Now the reason why for single arms, obviously to stay nice and balanced, but also because when you're overhead pressing, and if you haven't got that greater shoulder mobility like we've shown in Anthony's movement assessments, basically what can happen is a hyperextension of the spine. So the rib cage flares and the back extends, and this can create a lot of load on the lower back. So as a substitute, we worked single arm, and single arm you're able to engage your core a lot more, being able to be more in control, to load the shoulder overhead without extending that spine and putting a lot of force and a lot of load through the lower back. Then transfer this into more explosive action using the dumbbell split jerk. Another great exercise for increased strength, speed and explosiveness of the upper body. Also great for eccentric control of the lower body too. The challenge for Anthony here is to stabilise the shoulder when pushing the dumbbell overhead to make sure that his upper body is in nice upright position. So not only a great exercise for upper body explosiveness and speed, but also great for hip, shoulder and core stability.
Good, well done.
We can also get speed strength gains from the upper body using punch specific actions. We use the landmine punch throw, not only as a test but as training too. Making sure we're driving through that back leg, using the rotation and extending that arm nice explosively. Throwing the bar as hard as you can. Just a quick one on single leg training. We didn't do anything too technical. We did goblet reverse lunges, walking dumbbell lunges as well. And we performed anywhere between 6 and 10 reps on each side. As sparring intensified, we took away the eccentric portion and used dumbbell step-ups, where really you're focusing on the concentric. As you're coming down, there's not too much load eccentrically, so not creating muscle damage. So working on his core, over the last 6 months, the amount of core exercises that we used, there was a huge range. Over the 6 months, we used a huge range of core exercises, so to cover them all would be a whole workshop in itself. So I'm just going to share a few with you. Now these are leg lowers. So important thing is to extend the hips, is to extend the legs and flex the legs and trying to keep that neutral spine. So a little bit of hip flexion with neutral spine and anti-extension here. You can learn more about this in our core training workshop. So you do 5 with the arms down, 5 with the arms up, and then 5 with the arms and your legs extended at the same time. And the challenging thing is to keep your stomach tense, not low back against the floor. So that's what I'm just monitoring there. And then we've got the barbell rollout. Now the rollouts and ab rollouts are quite popular with boxers. I included Anthony, that's just worked on the wheel before. But as you can tell straight away, he's wanting to use them big strong shoulders. So I'm just telling him to keep his shoulders back and down. Squeeze the shoulder blades together. And also working on the range as well. You know, we're wanting to work towards 80 and 20% of the range. So it's like little pulses and just keeping activating of the core all the way through. You can tell that he's finding it a lot harder already, just doing little tweaks to an exercise and really targets the adaptation that we're looking for, can make an exercise much more difficult but much more effective at the same time. Ooh. A great way to develop core strength and stability is using isometric core holds. So we got Fowler working for a minute on these with 15-second recoveries. Med ball slams are a great way to target anti-extension and hip flexion through an explosive movement, needing a strong stretch shortening cycle to produce that force to drive the ball into the floor. However, you couldn't get your legs quite involved with this, so we use a kneeling variation too. Take the legs away and really focus on the core. We target rotation, anti-rotation exercises. So a lot of cable work we've done working on that rotation, but we notice we're just moving the upper body and it's not going all the way back. It's keeping his core nice and tense to reproduce force into that rotation. Another way to target anti-rotation and rotation is using the med balls, kneeling side on and catching that ball into the breadbasket, only allowing a slight rotation before throwing the weight back to the coach. So moving on to his conditioning protocols now. So as Alan said before, we needed to improve Anthony's ability to produce high intensities, repeat and endure them. And yes, he's a machine, but we needed to push him and see how he responded to higher intensity exercises. Now, the Curve is an absolute brutal machine, non-motorised treadmill, and we started him on 30-second maximal sprints with 3 minutes recovery. As you can see, this takes a lot out of him, as it does for most of our boxers. Now, for 30-second maximal sprints, we take down 3 recordings per rep. His speed at 7 seconds, 27. His speed at 7 seconds, 17 seconds, and 27. The black line represents our group of boxers that are the most committed to the program, that are able to produce the high scores and the best scores. So this is an average of their performance on the 30-second maximal sprints. The orange line represents Anthony's first session. Now, I'm not going to talk about the first session too much, as it doesn't give a real indication of his physical makeup, because the Curve is a hard machine to get used to start off with. So I don't expect people to go on the Curve for the first time, have perfect running technique, and being able to produce those high intensities. But you can see from the orange line that he wanted to pace himself. He was only hitting 28.5 kilometers per hour on at the start, and then the second number was actually sometimes higher than the first number, and the speed would only drop a little bit. This indicated that Anthony was more used to running at one pace, so even if he did sprints, There wasn't a major acceleration in there or massive decrease in speed. Everything was done, even if it's a high pace, it's done at a high tempo and maintained throughout each interval rep. So the blue line is his second session, and as you can see, he's able to produce a lot more speed, just getting used to the curve and the running technique as well. You can see he's quite far behind the others. It's quite irregular, there isn't a real pattern emerging. So he's hitting just above 23 on his first and third rep, and hitting around about 24 on his fourth rep. So you can see from the blue line in comparison to the black line is quite far behind the other lads on the program. So we use these numbers to help motivate and guide Anthony to the numbers that he should be hitting, and we did the 30-second maximal sprints for between 3 and 4 weeks before moving on to the delivery phase. So like we said, Anthony is quite like an endurance athlete, so runs like this were going to suit him. However, because he was so fit, cardiovascular wise, we struggled to get him up into the red zone. The red zone is obviously when your heart and lungs are pushed to the max, but because Anthony didn't have the sprinting speed on the curve or the treadmill, he struggled to reach an appropriate intensity where his heart and lungs were overloaded, so he needed to be in that red zone. So we had to tweak the program in comparison to doing our normal 4 minutes on, 2 minutes off. We had to split up the 4 minutes into different intervals, so either Tabatas, which is 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, or into 30-15, so 30 seconds on, 15 seconds off. And this just made sure that Anthony was running at a higher intensity, and this helped us creep into the red zone a little bit more. Cardiovascular system and create some central adaptations without running at high speeds is using altitude tent, and we use this often when people have high sparring loads, high training loads, or need to get fit quickly, because this reduction of oxygen within the tent makes it harder for you to pump oxygen to the working muscles. Therefore the muscles won't be able to produce as much speed, but the heart and the lungs are working even harder at like a lower intensity. So basically you are challenging the heart and lungs without taxing your lower body as much, and this is really good for boxers with high training loads or wanting to get fit quickly without overtraining or becoming too fatigued. Following a few training blocks, we returned to some maximal sprints of 20 seconds on, 3 minutes off. Now 20 seconds on, just try and target that anaerobic system a little bit more, try and elicit higher speeds and intensities as well. You can see now Anthony's not going one pace at all now. He's exploding into each rep and showing some great improvements in speed. It looks great and the numbers look even better. So the blue line is the 1st of June when he did his 30-second maximal sprints for the second time, and the orange line represents speeds done in September, so working 20 seconds on, 3 minutes off. As you can see, a massive improvement in his top speed. His final speed on the 20 seconds is faster than some of the top speeds of his 30-second sprint. So you can see that with the machine now is changing from an endurance machine into a high intensity one. So you can produce high intensities, you can repeat and endure them too. Seeing data like this, instant feedback as well. So seeing data like this in our spreadsheet where we get instant feedback, we're able to give it to the athlete. You know, it's only a few weeks before the fight. Look how much you've improved in the last 10, 12, 15 weeks, however long you've been on the program. The hard work that you're putting into this program, the 100% effort that you're giving to the protocols is paying off. And that's hugely satisfying for myself and Alan as well, who work hard behind the scenes at creating these protocols and our programs and everything like that. So it's always good to see our athletes improving using these training methods. As we get closer to the fight, we reduce the volume, we reduce the amount of fatigue that our conditioning sessions elicit, and we work on 10-second maximal sprints. We find that this is a perfect way to maintain fitness, again from a long period of training. Keep up the intensity, and it's good for confidence building as well. We knew that we got Anthony into a great position, and we knew that he was going to absolutely blast through these scores. So when he first started, he was hitting scores of 20.5, 23, and in this session it's the magic number of 28.5 kilometers per hour. So that's a massive 23% increase in maximum running speed. So, you know, we'd expect 10% or even 5% improvements. Anthony's hard work and his dedication has seen amplified success.
Go on. Wait.
So after any research project or program that we do at Boxing Science, we have to take our post-training intervention results. So we got Anthony back into the labs, take his body composition, reassess his jumps, and take him through a lactate profile again. So myself and Alan are now going to have a look through his results and explain some of the progress that Anthony's made whilst being on the Boxing Science program. So here are some of his key results that we posted in an infograph just before his fight on September 30th. He showed a 10% increase in upper body strength. This is based off his dumbbell chest press scores. He also showed great improvements in body composition. So on our in-body machine, Anthony came into the program a very modest 6 or 7% body fat, and we got him down to 3% body fat. This is great, especially when he's going to be so big for the weight. He doesn't need to be carrying around that excess weight. If he wants to be a big light middleweight, he needs to be ripped when he's on the scales. Also, a big thing that we're wanting to do is to optimize his body mass when he is at light middleweight. And what we found in our research is that pound for pound trunk mass, so that's relative trunk mass to how much body mass that you have in total, is the biggest contributor to a fast and explosive punch. So all our programs are designed to try and improve this as much as we can, and particularly pound for pound. So when a boxer is making the weight, we're wanting to retain that lean muscle tissue around his core. And we saw a 4% increase in pound for pound trunk mass. So this is a good improvement, especially in a relatively short amount of time. We saw a 3.6 kilometers an hour increase in max running speed. That's just based off data from the start of that training block, but we're just seeing it was running at 23 kilometers per hour, and he went up all the way up to 28.5. He improved 12% increase in lower body explosiveness. So we're talking about the counter movement jump here. So he improved this counter movement jump by 5 centimeters, which is unbelievable. So 45 centimeters when he first started the program, and then he got all the way up to 50 centimeters. Normally, after a training block, especially with somebody that is done strength training before, we don't particularly expect anything more than 5 or 6% increases in jump height, but Anthony showed a 12% increase. And talking about the different issues around eccentric utilization and being able to overload and develop the eccentric portion of the stretch shortening cycle was difficult when we had to take away squats because he was getting sore and getting tired for his sessions with his coach. It's very pleasing to me to see him improve so much in this when I've had to be creative to get them results. So if we were doing like squats or Olympic lifting or something like that, these results are 10 a penny really. We're wanting these are biggest bang for your buck exercises. If you get stronger, you're going to be able to jump higher. But with Anthony, we had to be creative in how we develop that eccentric utilization by doing the drop jumps, the depth jumps, and putting like extras onto his warm-ups. To get these results were really pleasing, hence the little bit of overreaction that I'm just going to let you have a look at now.
Let's go, 3 times doing this. 48.2. Yeah, what, 50's coming. 50 comes off, I'm taking top off. Go on. Yes, it's there! Yeah! 48.7. Go on, you've got up again, so you'll have to go. Yeah? Again? Yeah, let's go again.
So, got a little bit carried away there, slightly unprofessional, but when you're around these lads, it's hard not to have a laugh from time to time. Now, onto his lactate profile. Let's see whether all them grueling curve sessions were worth it for Anthony. I'll pass you over to Dr. Alan Ruddert.
The pink line represents the change in blood lactate concentration at each individual speed, and you can see at the start at 12 kilometers per hour there was an increase in his blood lactate. Now on its own that doesn't really tell you much, but it does give us an indication that he's now using his anaerobic pathways much more effectively, and he's just starting to produce a little more lactate at low intensities. And like I say, on its own, it doesn't tell the whole story, and it's quite a complex picture, but that gives us that little bit of encouragement that that our high intensity interval training is working. What we also saw was, and this is very key, is that he finished the lactate profile at 18 kilometers per hour instead of 17 kilometers per hour, which he finished his previous test at. And that gives us an indication that yes, now he's able to run at much higher intensities for pretty much the same lactate concentration and be able to endure that. And so we've, over the period of 10, 12, 15 weeks, so worked on Anthony's ability to use anaerobic energy sources and use those energy pathways that are required in high intensity sports, and he's made some good improvements, and he's now changing the way that he produces energy and the way that he accesses energy, so he's becoming a much more well-developed high intensity athlete.
So that's the end of Train Like the Machine, strength and conditioning experience with Anthony Fowler. Thanks for listening to myself and Alan. I think the main thing to take away from this is that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Sometimes you've got to be creative and think outside the box and to get the best out of your athletes. I'd like to thank Alan Ruddock for his support on the conditioning and testing side, and obviously his contributions to this workshop. Tommy Munday for being an excellent assistant. Dave Colwell is coach, that's been excellent to work with and collaborate with. And of course, big thanks to Anthony Fowler. Without his 100% effort, these results and this workshop wouldn't happen. Okay, if anyone's got any questions, please fire them over to boxing.site@gmail.com or to our Boxing Science Facebook training page.